Thank you all for coming. This forum is about ranked choice voting. I hope everybody had a chance to grab a cheese ballot, try the cheeses, rank them, and I will do the vote count in the presentation so we can see how it works live. Great? All right. So, Voter Choice Massachusetts, we are a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization dedicated to electoral reforms that increase the range of choice on the ballot and produce fairer outcomes for all. Now, in a democracy, we may not always get what we want, but we at least want the system to be fair, right? Yeah. Well, what is the problem with our current system? Well, we've been doing it for 200 years, why change it, right? Well, some of you may remember this. This is the presidential election in the year 2000, specifically the results in Florida we're looking at, where George Bush, Al Gore, and Ralph Nader were all running for president. Bush and Gore were virtually tied, both at about 49% of the votes. Ralph Nader distant third with less than 2%. Now that seems insignificant, but that's almost 100,000 votes compared to the 537 votes that separated the two frontrunners. And from exit polling, we see what would have happened if Nader were not in the race. A quarter of them said they wouldn't have voted at all. They would have stayed home. A quarter of them said they would have voted for George Bush, but almost half of them said they would have voted for Al Gore. And the pejorative term that people use to describe Ralph Nader in this situation is that he's a spoiler, right? That he's pulling votes away from the next closest candidate, from a more similar candidate, allowing the least aligned candidate to actually win the election. Closer to home, this is the Boston mayoral preliminary in 2013. They have a nonpartisan preliminary to start with and a top two runoff. Now, in 2013, Boston became, for the first time, a majority person of color city. And we see that in the diverse field of candidates, a lot of qualified African American and Hispanic candidates. But the final election came down to a choice between two white Irish guys. Even though there were many qualified candidates of color, and Charlotte Golorichie was only 3 points away from making it to the top two. The fact that there were so many may have split up the vote, not allowing any of them to make it to the final round. And the Boston Globe found that some of her supporters were actually trying to get other candidates of color to drop out of the race so that she would have a better chance of advancing. Now, more candidates in our system should mean better elections, more choices for the voters, but our current system undermines it. More recently, this is the 3rd Congressional District primary, the seat that was held by Representative Nikki Tsongas in the Lowell area. And she announced she wasn't running for re-election, and these 10 candidates jumped in the race to replace her. And the winner, Lori Trahan, won with less than 22% of the votes. Now, how do we know that she actually has the mandate of her district? We don't. 127 votes separated her from second-place finisher Daniel Coe. We should know that whoever wins an election has the mandate of the majority of the district. Even more recently, the mayor of Fall River, Jazel Correa, under investigation by the FBI, and the people of Fall River said, hey, let's have a recall election. Let's decide if he should continue being our mayor. That sounds like a great idea, right? Well, they had the election, and it turns out 61% of the residents of Fall River said, yes, we should recall this mayor. But on that same ballot, that same exact ballot that recalled him, the second question was, who would you like as your next mayor? The winner is Jazel Correa with 35.5% of the vote. I hope I'm not assuming too much to say that the 61% of the voters who said, we don't want him as our mayor, were not the 35% that voted for him. But the fact that there were 4 candidates, the fact that they had options on who to select, may have caused him to be reelected. Having more options in a democracy should be a good thing. We should have a system that allows more participation while keeping this from happening on a regular basis. And this does happen on a regular basis. What I've described so far is not the exception, but often the rule in Massachusetts politics. This is data from the last 20 years, 1996 to 2016. Races in Massachusetts where you had 3 or more candidates running, 60% of the time in governor's races, you had the winner win with less than 50% of the votes. 67% of the time for lieutenant governors, 86% for district attorney, 44% state rep, a third of the state senate. This happens over and over, and we should do something to fix it. Can we do something to fix it? I hope I've thoroughly bummed you out. But the plurality system is a true spoiler. It fails to guarantee majority winners. It fails to eliminate the spoiler effect. It discourages candidates from running by the possibility of being branded with a stigma of being a spoiler. And that limits our choice in the voting booth. But there is something we can do about it, and it's called ranked choice voting. Ranked choice voting is a really simple change to the way we vote. rather than just choosing one candidate, you rank them. First choice, second choice, third choice, in the order you prefer. And I hope filling out those ballots has shown you how easy it is. If you can count, you can rank. This is the ballot they used in Maine. Maine became the first state to adopt ranked choice voting in 2016. They passed it as a referendum, and they used it in their elections in 2018, both the primary election in June and the general election in November. This is the ballot for the Democratic gubernatorial primary, and we have these 7 candidates running. As you see, first choice, you fill that in your first column, second choice in the second column, third choice, so on and so forth, as many or as few candidates as you'd like to vote. If you just like one, you can rank your first choice and leave the rest blank. But the power of ranked choice voting is that you have backup choices. To win with ranked choice voting, you have to have a majority of the votes, over 50%. We want a majority of the district to agree on the person that actually wins the election, either in the first round or in the instant runoff. Now, what does that look like? Here's an example of 4 people running for the same seat. We've got Connor, Gina, Ted, and Valerie all running in this hypothetical election. And in this example, we see Ted with 53% of the votes. He clearly has a majority, and that makes him the winner. What happens more often is that the votes are more split up. Here's another example where nobody has over 50% of the votes. Now, what happens? Well, Valerie, who's in last place, is eliminated. But the important distinction is that with ranked choice voting, the voters who selected Valerie are not eliminated because they get to have their second choices counted. Even if they really liked Valerie, but they knew she wasn't going to be a front runner, or maybe they didn't know she wasn't going to be one of the front runners, they get to have a backup choice in case their favorite candidate doesn't have enough votes to continue. And we allocate those votes to those voters' second choices, because from the ballot, we know what they would have done if she were not in the race. And we distribute those votes to those voters' second choices. We see that still nobody has a majority. Next lowest would be Connor in this example, 29%. He's eliminated. And now his voters' second choices, or third choices of those Valerie voters, are transferred to their next choice candidate. And we see Gina has a majority now, 56% true. She's the winner. Easy as that. So this is the first time ranked choice voting was used to determine the result in a federal election. As I said, Maine became the first state to enact it on a statewide level. We had Bruce Poliquin, Jared Golden, Tiffany Bond, Will Hoare all running for the seat. Poliquin was the incumbent. He's a Republican, Jared Golden, Democrat challenger, and the 2 independent candidates. And we see in the first round, nobody has a majority of the votes. We had Poliquin and Golden both around 46%, Poliquin slightly in the lead. Will Hoare and Tiffany Bond way back. But since nobody has a majority, we eliminate the candidates in last place, so the independent candidates, and we transfer those votes to the voters' next choices. And we see that almost by a 2-to-1 margin, they prefer Jared Golden to Bruce Poliquin. And that brings him over 50%. So third-party candidates are able to participate without being detrimental to their voters' next choices. Now, this happened to help the Democrat in this case, but it can work the other way around as well. The race in 2010 where Charlie Baker was elected, Charlie Baker was not elected, Deval Patrick was elected, but we had an independent candidate probably pulling votes away from Baker in that election. Lots of examples of this going either way. So this is a nonpartisan reform. It just makes sure whoever wins the election has the mandate of the majority. In cities that use the nonpartisan preliminary and top 2 runoff system, this actually saves a lot of money because rather than having 2 separate low turnout elections, you can have one ranked choice election to determine the winner and have much higher voter turnout at the same time. So you rank the candidates and you can get a winner on one ballot rather than 2. I don't know if you know this, but elections are very expensive. Has anybody gone door knocking for candidates before? Campaigning? Yes. So this will sound familiar. What are you told to do if you see an opponent sign on the lawn? Ignore the house, don't waste your time, talk to somebody who might actually vote for you, right? Well, it's very different with ranked choice voting. You don't get a frowny face and walk away. Instead, you can still go up to the door and say, hey, I see you're voting for my opponent in this race. That's great. Here are the areas where we agree on. This is where we have consensus. Even if I can't get your first choice vote, can I get your second choice vote? See, the incentives are completely reversed. Ranked choice voting is a real practical solution. It eliminates spoilers and vote splitting. It encourages more people to run. It curbs negative campaigning. And it gives voters more voice and more choice in our elections. This can transform politics in Massachusetts. We've got ballots here. So what happens in a ranked choice voting election is we organize the ballot by people's first choices. So the first choice on this ballot was Swiss, so I put that in the Swiss pile. First choice on this ballot, mild cheddar. First choice on this ballot, Parmesan, Asiago, cheddar, Swiss, pepper jack. Somebody likes it spicy. Another one for pepper jack, cheddar, Colby jack, pepper jack, cheddar, Parmesan, and a few more for Asiago. So now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 people who voted. And do we have a majority? No. We have 2 frontrunners who are at 4 votes each, right? That's less than a quarter of the votes. So if we were to decide a winner with the first past the post system, we'd have somebody elected with less than a quarter of the votes. But with ranked choice voting, let's see who's in last place. When you have more votes, it's less likely for ties. But since we do have this small number of votes, I'm going to eliminate one at a time the candidates who have 2 votes each, right? So we've got Colby Jack right here. The second choice on these ballots was both for Swiss. Parmesan is 2 votes, is in last place at the moment. We've got this going to cheddar. One of the votes, the second choice was for cheddar. And this ballot's second choice was for Asiago. So now in last place is pepper jack with 3 votes. Second choice is Fontina, who didn't get any first choice votes. So they've already been eliminated. So we go to that voter's third choice. Okay? So it goes to the highest ranked candidate that is still in the race. So first choice was eliminated, second choice has already been eliminated. So third choice, Parmesan, was already eliminated. Fourth choice, Asiago. Okay, next available choice on this ballot, Swiss. And cheddar. All right, so we've got 3 candidates left, and Swiss is in last place with 5 votes. The other 2 candidates have 6 votes each. Nail biter. This is coming down to the wire here. I hope everybody's on the edge of their seats. Okay, this is going to decide it. So we had 17 votes total. So we need 9 votes to win, right? And we're at 6 votes each for Asiago and mild cheddar. Let's see. Next candidate that's still available is mild cheddar. Mild cheddar. Let's see this one. Mild cheddar. Oh. Mild cheddar, and mild cheddar. 11 votes. We have a winner, right? Yes, thank you very much. Now that is the magic algorithm. The secret black box that your votes go into can easily be deciphered with paper and pencil. There's nothing magical about it. So if you hear that this is some kind of mathematical process that your votes go into and there's no way to actually check the votes, that's not true. Again, you can do this with hand counting, and a lot of places actually do. Ireland, for example, uses ranked choice voting, and they used to use electronic machines for scanning ballots. But they actually went back to hand counting because it was a more realistically, a more fun process. It got the community more involved. Reporters came out to the polling stations. You could see stacks of ballots in different piles. As you saw, there was some excitement, right? It really is it's amazing to see this happen right before your eyes. So we found a consensus winner. So we had a whole lot of cheeses, right? We had to choose a cheese to rule them all. And so we had 8 different cheeses to start off with, but we can only have 1 cheese for the next 4 years, right? Everybody has to have the same cheese for the next 4 years. But with ranked choice voting, we see where the true majority lies, rather than having the votes so split up. So ranked choice voting, enacted in Maine in 2016 by a referendum, they used it in the June primaries and the November elections last year. Maine's the first state to enact ranked choice voting, but it's not the only place in the US. About a dozen cities around the country already use ranked choice voting, from Minneapolis, San Francisco, Portland, Maine, Santa Fe, New Mexico, Berkeley. The city of Cambridge has actually been using it since the 1940s. So this isn't some newfangled thing that some PhD students came up with. This has been used for a while, and it's worked. Cambridge uses it for their city council elections still today. And more cities are coming on board. Memphis, Tennessee, Benton County, Oregon, Amherst, Massachusetts have all passed ranked choice voting initiatives. They will start using it in upcoming elections. Around the world, it's used, as I said, in Ireland, Scotland, Canada, New Zealand. Australia has used it, get this, over 100 years. The most fun, mind-blowing fact of the whole thing, right? Over 100 years. This is not a new concept. This is something that has been tried and tested, proven all over. It's not just countries, it's not just governments. Over 50 colleges and universities around the state of Massachusetts use ranked choice voting for electing leadership. Again, you have less negativity, a more inclusive, more cohesive, a process of selecting leaders where you have better group unity in the decision-making process. The National Organization for Women, the American Political Science Association use ranked choice voting, and most importantly, the Oscars use it for Best Picture. I know. You should make that even bigger. But this is tried and true all over the place, and that's why I'm here, bringing this message to you, answering your questions. But we have people all over the state. We have chapters set up from the Berkshires to the North Shore to here on the Cape. I was even out on Martha's Vineyard a couple weeks ago. I would have preferred if they sent me out there in July, but I'll take what I can get. We started with 200 people on a mailing list in November of 2016 when Maine passed ranked choice voting. And an email went out saying, hey, Maine just did this, let's make it happen here. And 54 of those people met up in an office in Boston and said, you know what, how do we make this a reality? Well, first of all, 54 voting nerds sitting in a room is not going to get anybody's attention. Legislators are not going to care. So the first thing we did is we need to grow and scale. And we have, from 54 people at that first meeting, we have over 25,000 supporters around the state at this time. Almost 5,000 people have signed up to volunteer with our organization. Organizations all over the state, from the Democratic Party, Green Rainbow Party, Libertarian Party, Common Cause Massachusetts, Our Revolution, the League of Women Voters of Massachusetts, and many others have endorsed ranked choice voting and have put it on their platforms because they see it is a common sense, simple change to the way we vote that can really make a difference in our elections. These past and current elected officials have also endorsed ranked choice voting. And we introduced bills into the state legislature this January. If you're unfamiliar with the process for introducing bills, it's a bit hectic because these legislators are sworn in the beginning of January. January 18th was the deadline to file the legislation, and then February 1st was the deadline to sign on as a co-sponsor. And so what do? We're like, well, we want as many co-sponsors as we can. And so we reached out. Again, we're not 200 people anymore, we're 25,000. So we reached out to the list of people who said they could volunteer and said, hey, can you hop on the phones right now? We need to activate people to contact their legislators. We had 50 people in that 1 week period together made almost 6,000 calls. Had hundreds of people contacting their legislators saying, hey, we want you to sign on as co-sponsor. We want you to support this bill. And we blew past our goal of, we were like, maybe if we're lucky, we'll get 35 co-sponsors. As a stretch goal, maybe we'll try for 50 co-sponsors. No. We had 82 legislators sign on as co-sponsors within that first week. Since then, we have met with 5 more who have endorsed and said, yes, we will support ranked choice voting. So that's 43.5% of the state legislature at this point. But we need more. 43.5% is less than half. Fun fact. But we are right now working to get a supermajority in both chambers. And that's really what we need your help on. Number one, talking to more people. We haven't met with all 200 yet, and we want to. And mobilizing our existing list of supporters to contact the representatives. Boston Globe has taken notice of what we're doing. They sat down with our policy team, grilled them for several hours, and came out with this glowing review saying this is something that Massachusetts desperately needs, and it needs it right now. And again, after that 3rd congressional district primary, right, the 10 candidates, winner with less than 22%, they came out with another editorial saying this is exactly why we need ranked choice voting. That's not all. We had a third endorsement from their editorial board. And just last week, after the Fall River fiasco, a fourth editorial saying, please pass ranked choice voting. This is needed. So the strategy for making this happen, we're actively pursuing ranked choice voting legislation. It is currently in the legislature. We are working towards a majority. We need to meet with all 200 of the state senators and representatives. And we need to talk to them and explain ranked choice voting, because the number one thing that prevents people from supporting this is that they have questions. I'm sure a lot of you had questions. I'm sure there are still some questions we can answer. But talking to legislators one-on-one, showing them exactly how it works, how this would help the political process, that's really what gets them on board and helps make this a reality. If they don't pass it this year, we are prepared to go for a ballot measure in 2020. To succeed, we need three things, and that's what we've been focusing on. People, money, and endorsements is really the key to making this happen. Like I said, having a few people talking about it is not going to make a difference. But 25,000 supporters reaching out to their legislators, that gets their attention. Almost 4 million people around the country currently use ranked choice voting. If we are able to pass it in Massachusetts, that'll bring the nationwide total to almost 12 million people. And that really gives the nationwide push for this that much more momentum. There are a lot of states looking at us right now to see what we'll do. Michigan, New York, and Connecticut, and about 24 other states. But all eyes are really on Massachusetts. Maine may have been the first state to do it, but a lot of people are like, it's just weird Maine in the corner there. No, they want to see if a bigger state like Massachusetts can actually pass ranked choice voting. We picked up the torch from Maine after they passed it and said, we're going to make it happen here. And if we are able to do this, then it gives the nationwide push that much more momentum. So that's why it's so important that everyone gets involved and helps make this a reality. Thanks for watching. If you want to get involved, go to vcma.us and sign up to join us in this fight for better elections. Volunteer with our live outreach team to sign up more supporters, host a house party to show your friends and neighbors the power of ranked choice voting, or even make some phone calls from home to drive specific actions. There's plenty of ways to push this movement forward and make ranked choice voting a reality in Massachusetts. Thank you very much.